Hi, podcast listeners. Welcome to the A World of Difference podcast. We have so many guests on this show making a difference in our lives, making a difference all around the world with the expertise that they bring. And yet so many of you are reaching out to me saying, you want more. It's not enough just what we're putting on these podcast episodes for you. And so I am here to extend a very warm welcome to you to our Difference Maker community, where you can join for as little as $5 a month to get all this extra content. Out the gate, you're going to get 30 plus mini-sodes of exclusive content not available for the regular podcast listeners, and an exclusive mini-sode every month. And you'll get exclusive voting power to help us pick podcast topics and more. And that's at our Changers tier. There's 3 different main tiers and then an extra larger tier. But whatever tier that you join at, you will be included in this extra content. And I know that many of you are wanting to go a little bit deeper. And so even though it gets a little wild in there sometimes because of how deep we go, I want you to join us there. This extra content is very special. It means a great deal to me to be a part of this community with you. And I would love to just exchange ideas or perspectives that you have around these different episodes. And that's the place where we do it. So please show up to our Difference Maker community. Give us $5 out of your pocket every month. And I think that you'll have a lot of fun in there because we do. And I would love for you to join us. So go to patreon.com/A World of Difference to join us there. Welcome to the A World of Difference podcast. I'm Lori Adams Brown, and this is a podcast for those who are different and want to make a difference. Our guest on today's show is Perrine Farque. She's coming from London. She's an author, entrepreneur, keynote speaker, and diversity expert who empowers leaders to leverage diversity as their competitive advantage. She was nominated as in the top 50 most influential UK tech women. She continues to be recognized for her contributions that she's making in the diversity and inclusion space. She drove strategy at companies such as Facebook and is on a mission to make the workplace more inclusive and diverse. Welcome to today's show, Perrine Farque. Hi, Perrine. Welcome to the World of Difference podcast.
Hi, Lori. Thanks for having me.
Of course. And I know you're calling in from London today, but I'd love to know how you ended up in London and maybe a little more about who you are and your background and what you do.
Yeah, sure. So I was born and bred in France, in Dijon. It's a kind of small kind of countryside area near Switzerland. And I started studying law when I was at university. I was very interested in social justice and fairness, etc. And then I moved to Italy when I was in my, early 20s. I moved to Italy and I started working in Italy. And then me and my then boyfriend, now husband, we moved together to London, UK, because we wanted to have more career opportunities and experience the London lifestyle. So I've always worked in the UK, in London. I've always worked in technology and in the software world, actually for a lot of American-based companies, of course, Silicon Valley headquartered companies that had a presence in EMEA in London. As a woman working in a very straight white male dominated environment, I often found myself, I was the only woman in the room or the only mother in the room. And it became very obvious that I didn't get promoted at the same rate as my male counterparts, and all sorts of small, subtle acts of microaggression. So that's what led me to do what I do today, which is really helping organizations avoid that pitfall and create a very inclusive and diverse work environment where everybody feels included and like they belong, and they can be fully engaged with their work.
Oh man, that's great. Because I think when it comes from personal experience, there's a different level of passion involved in the diversity and inclusion space. And on the A World of Difference podcast, we are all about diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. And so your book that you have written called Inclusion is something I really wanted our listeners to know about and find and read, and to have you on to really just give us the why. Why did you write this book? I think probably your story gives us a little hint, but ultimately, what is it that made you sit down and write the book Inclusion?
Yeah, it's such a great question. When I was working for one of those technology firms, one of those technology companies, one day I found invited to the Women in Leadership lunch at my company annual kickoff event in California, where the entire company had flown to spend a few days there. And despite my well-known passion for women in business, etc., and that sort of small incident happened after an entire year of feeling excluded or unfairly passed over for well overdue promotions, etc. And for me it was a bit of an aha moment of a wake-up call, and that made me decide that I wanted to change that. And surely there was a better way. I sure there must be a better way to look after employees and create a very inclusive environment. So that's the story. And obviously it happened gradually. I started thinking, what can I do? And then just slowly, surely, I started, writing a lot about what inclusion means in the workplace setting, what diversity means in the context of the workplace, which is my background. And the more I wrote, the more I connected with people, and it just one thing leads to another, and one day I wrote a book. So it just happened gradually. But that's kind of story. That's kind of the kick-off story. That was a bit of the start of everything for me.
Wow. Yeah, that's good. I think that, you would definitely want to write a book called Inclusion by including other voices in your process. And it sounds like you did do that. And you yourself already have lived in so many countries and cultures, and you speak multiple languages. So that already gave you that perspective going in that, not everybody has. And it's certainly a particular worldview that inclusion is even important. But I want to also dig into, because I've seen you have written a little bit about this as well, but why is diversity important?
Yeah, it's such a great question. And I love that you asked this question, because I think a lot of people are a little bit confused about the term. It sounds like a very complex and scary term, diversity and inclusion. And I'm really glad you asked the question. And you're right. For me personally, that's my personal story. It all started with inclusion for me. And again, it's my personal work experience. I felt, I think it's funny how people often, when to define things, they talk about the opposite. So when I say, what does inclusion mean to you? They talk about exclusion, right? That's me. So when someone asks me, what does inclusion mean to me? I talk about that time I felt excluded. And so it all started with inclusion for me. It became very apparent to me that feeling included, and by that I mean feeling seen and heard and valued and respected at work, is really the base of everything. It's really the foundation of everything, where you can build trust, psychological safety, accountability, and so on. And so to your point, but is inclusion enough? So for example, you could have a workplace or a team where everybody feels included. What if they are all middle-aged, straight, white male?
Yeah.
Would that bring a level of innovation and creativity? The answer is probably not. So that's why, for me, that's where diversity comes in. Whilst it's great to have a team and an organization that's inclusive, where everybody feels seen and heard and valued, it's great. We also want to make sure that we represent the diversity of the population, because if we don't represent the whole spectrum of the different genders and the different ethnicities, different religions, different age groups, we're going to miss out. We're not going to be innovative. We're not going to think outside the box. We're not going to represent the entire customer. We really want to, for me, that's where diversity comes in, right? So yes, inclusion is super important, but we it doesn't really make sense to have a workplace that's inclusive but we only have the same types of people. So for me, that's where those two parts come together.
Yes, that makes so much sense. And I think there is a lot of research out there now and it makes sense even without the research. I think intuitively we would all somewhat understand the concept that if you have a product that you would like to be sold globally or even across, for example, the entire state of California, you would want to include everybody in that market and you would want that product to be sold to as many people as possible if you're trying to go for profit. And if you want as many people as possible to buy your product, it would make sense to have their voices included on how that affects them, whether they want that product or not, how to market it. Like all of those aspects really do inherently require there to be a diversity of thought at the table and inclusion in the process of how it folds out. And it's certainly been proven in the research that the bottom line is very much affected by having diversity and inclusion, more prominently featured, which is why here in the Silicon Valley, there are multiple jobs and all the different companies around diversity and inclusion, especially I would say in the aftermath of what happened here in the US last year with George Floyd and how some of the racial reconciliation conversation was more prominent. So there's multiple reasons for it, but I would love your perspective on what do you think are just some of the most basic tenets of diversity, equity, and inclusion that we as a global society really need to learn?
Yeah, great question again. I think, in my opinion, it really starts with what I call a couple of things. So leading by example. I think all of us as human beings, we all have a version of ourselves we aspire to become, right? There kind of aspirational us, the person we want to be and the person we actually are, right? So a lot of the times we want to be wise and compassionate and generous, etc. But in reality, sometimes we fail. Maybe we're a bit tired or overwhelmed or stressed or anxious. And so I think, starting with ourselves. So what can I do today to be a little bit more like the version of I aspire to become? And I think it starts with small changes. It's not a dramatic, drastic change overnight. That would be unrealistic, but small things we can all do every day in our lives. For example, for me, I'm very busy, like most of us, and I like to listen to podcasts. So, instead of going for a run, just running, I would maybe tune into a podcast and hear from someone who is a different gender or a different ethnic background and hear from them and what can I learn from them. Or an audiobook. I would listen to an audiobook on my walk, picking up the kids, for example, from school, and learn something from someone who is a different background, a different sexual orientation. So that's an example of a small thing I can do every day to raise my awareness, to increase my awareness about different sexual orientations, etc. And those are small things I think most of us can do. And that's just an example, but there are so many others. But really, in the context of the workplace, really leading by example, I think it's tough. I mean, we'll know, work is hard. We all have pressure and deadlines and timeframes. It's stressful. But as much as we can every day, try to behave in the way we want to be treated. So, for example, if we go into a meeting at work and someone is being a little bit maybe bullied or talked over in a way that's a little bit rude or inappropriate, maybe we can say something and stand up. It doesn't matter if we don't have a fancy title or we don't have a team. We can be just an individual contributor. We can say something. So by standing up and speaking up against a misconduct, we are essentially leading by example, and we're inspiring others to follow in our footsteps. So I think it's just the small things each and one of us can do every day. The small things we can do to be a little bit more inclusive, a little bit more aware about how our behavior impacts. I think this is really the key to answer your question about how to create a more inclusive and diverse society and workplace.
I love that. Yeah, I think that the examples of bullying we can find in every culture and to a certain extent, even minor ways, and sometimes more than minor ways in most workplaces, because I think in a sociological sense, we tend to want to be around people that are like us. It feels comfortable to be around people who think like you, and groupthink is just something we naturally slip into. But it doesn't help us to be in groupthink if we are trying to create, for example, like we said earlier, a product or a service, or even I would say, like if in a faith-based space, if you want your church to be accessible to all people or any religious environment, it wouldn't really be helpful to get into groupthink because it limits how far we can go. And so, but we have a very similar perspective on life in the sense that using the time you have, and I think that the moms probably instinctively have to do this, which is when you're jogging, listen to a podcast. I mean, just multitask with it, because we are busy, putting on a podcast when you're driving in your car to pick up your kids. Like those are all things I do as well. And we may not have the chance to go in person and meet with somebody who's different from us and sit and listen to them. but people have written audiobooks, and recorded them in their own voice even. And I have certainly benefited from all those things. I think the big question is, what's the harm in listening? It doesn't mean you have to agree with 100% or even 1% of what they say. But honestly, at the end of the day, what is the harm in listening to a different perspective, even if it solidifies your own even more? But at the risk that you've been wrong or seen it in a way that's harmful, or unintentionally bullying them because you see them in a way that's not really truly how they are, there's a chance that you could become different and you could change to be a person who is more understanding. And we certainly all, as human beings, deserve that. At the end, I'm going to ask you to kind of recommend some resources, so you can certainly recommend any of those podcasts you listen to. But the next question I wanted to go into is, so let's look at, you've been in the corporate world for a long time, and this can even apply to government or nonprofits or even faith-based spaces. So what happens when you have this mid-level and entry level of an organization that maybe they are inclusive in those levels, but at the senior level, you have what looks like an all-white manel. So the manel whole idea is a panel of all men, which, people have called out in recent years because, certainly we can include at least one woman, hopefully two, in these panels. But what if a senior level leadership is all men and even all white men, maybe all white American men? Like, you can get as narrow as you want. But how is that going to affect an organization, even though mid and entry levels are inclusive?
Yeah, again, a great question. I think there are different ways to go about it. In the context of a business, for example, a business organization, if the top senior leadership is very homogeneous from a demographics perspective, and maybe they don't really see the value of diversity and inclusion, there are a couple of ways we can go about it. So one way is to we just need one senior leader to really embrace and understand and believe in diversity and inclusion. We don't need the entire senior leadership team. So that's one thing. So try to identify one champion, if possible, of diversity and inclusion. They could be, they don't have to be the CEO or the highest. They could be the chief finance officer or the chief operation officer or someone else. So try to identify just one. And then try to find what is their personal story of exclusion, because we all have a personal story of exclusion, whether it's when we were a kid and we were not invited to a birthday party, or maybe they have a niece who was excluded because maybe she was LGBT plus, or they know someone who's been excluded. So try to find their personal connection to being excluded. It could be themselves, it could have been a close family member or friend, because this way they could connect at a personal level and really better understand. Another way would be to show them how their competitors are doing really, really well because they are embracing diversity and inclusion, especially in the context of business. For example, say, hey, look at what, McDonald's or Nike, for example, they are now associating their senior leadership's bonus compensation based on diversity goals. So in other words, if they hit their goals on diversity for the workforce, they're going to be compensated and paid bigger bonuses. And by showing what the competition is doing, that should be an incentive to do it as well. So those are all ways that, we can turn things around. But also, I completely agree that this, having the backup and, from the commitment from senior leadership is key, right? Because without senior leadership commitment, it's going to be very hard to move the needle. Having said that, we can still do things at our small individual contributor level, I believe. So like I said earlier, you might be just one individual contributor in a team, and you might just make a small impact at your level, like speaking up against bullying or misconduct, being an advocate for underrepresented groups. And so you'd be surprised by the mirror effect. People would start mirroring your behavior, because people really do, they really get influenced. So if you start doing that at your level, you will, and I've seen that, you will see a cascade effect, people kind of following, and it will cascade into other teams. So it might be a bit slower to move the needle in terms of diversity and inclusion, but you will make some form of change. So those are just things that you can think about when you have a senior leadership team that doesn't really seem to be backing up or committed to diversity and inclusion.
Yeah, those are great ideas. I think that there is so much competition out there in the corporate world, where it's like, oh, look at that company, we want to be better than them. And so certainly I think tapping into that, inherent level of competition that exists and wanting to apply it to the diversity and inclusion space is really savvy. But maybe this is a good time to even just, are there any companies, that you know of that are doing well in the diversity, equity, and inclusion space that we could look to and understand how they're doing things and learn from them?
Yeah, I think there are. I really do. I mean, I have to mention Ben and Jerry's. I think Ben and Jerry's have been very vocal. I mean, very vocal advocates of human rights, and it's really surprising in a great way that such a huge name, such a big corporation that's known everywhere, is making such drastic commitment to fighting for human rights. And I won't go into the details. You can Google them, and they've been doing that for a while. It's not something. It's clearly it's not a tick a box exercise. They've been doing that for months, years, and it's. I think we should be very we should be grateful for all the things they do to fight for human rights. And even more so because they're a corporation, it would be easy for a corporation to just sit back and not really speak about human rights, but they do. So I think that's a company that really, for me, is a role model. I can also think of companies like, more recently, I mentioned Nike, McDonald's. They have Starbucks. They have announced that they are literally tying in their senior leadership bonus to diversity goals, and that's such a great move. I mean, not a lot of companies can say they actually put their money where their mouth is, because it's easy to make a statement online and on social media, but I think it's more difficult to actually put the money where your mouth is, and actually pay your leaders if they hire and retain diverse candidates. So those companies are certainly worth mentioning again. So Starbucks, Nike, McDonald's. There are others, but those are certainly really great names that come to mind right now.
Yeah, those are. And specifically because diversity and inclusion is so broad, we're talking about diversity inherently is a lot of, is including everyone basically. But as a woman, as a working woman, as a working mom, are there companies that you would point to that are doing particularly well with including women and even moms? Because I know in what we call the She Session that has happened here around the world, and we're particularly hard hit even in the Silicon Valley, of women stepping out of not just the C-suite, but at all different levels to pull back during the pandemic and take care of online schooling for children, or even elderly parents, and that kind of thing has really hit women hard. And so this is a big conversation right now, is how to woo these women back to work, because if you've lost, what they say is maybe about 30 years of progress that we've made in terms of women at work. Are there any companies that you feel like are doing a good job of addressing women in the workplace?
Yeah, one company that comes to mind for me is Facebook. I mean, love them or hate them, Facebook has always been a really strong advocate for women's career, in particular with Sheryl Sandberg, which I had the privilege of meeting because I worked at Facebook for a few years. For some time I did work at Facebook, and I went to Menlo Park, and I met her, and she, you probably know her book, Lean In. Yeah. And it's beyond her book, it's a movement, and she has a website and circles, and I mean it's a huge movement. Essentially, for those people who are listening to us who haven't read her book or who don't know, Sheryl Sandberg is the CEO at Facebook, and she's more than a CEO at Facebook. She's a leading voice and advocate for women's right, essentially, to work or to be a mom. So she said women should be able to do what they want to do. But the great things, I mean, for example, at Facebook, because of her, women have a great maternity leave, but way much more than what the minimum, in the US. So they've got a lot of weeks to take a maternity leave. I think they can take up to a year, I think. And even fathers, they've extended fathers' paternity leave, which then obviously allows mothers to resume their careers. So there are all sorts of great childcare support. So it's another example of a company that puts their money where their mouth is, and really, really support women if they decide to have children, and then to go back to their career. The women don't have to make a choice. So that I would definitely mention Facebook, and of course Sheryl Sandberg.
Yes, she's done so much. I even, when I was living in Singapore, I picked up Lean In our library and read it, and it's so inspiring to see someone who, you know, is at a high level of an organization like Sheryl Sandberg is, and so has more privileges to make those choices, and isn't just making them for herself, but is making them for other women, and is helping worldwide movements. We had Lean In circles in Singapore, and they're in a lot of different countries as well. And I think that one of the beautiful parts about being a woman is we're often socialized, not exclusively, because every culture is certainly different, but we're often socialized to be more collaborative. And so I love that she's bringing that aspect of her leadership around the world and encouraging women to collaborate in these circles. If you're a woman listening, or if you're a man listening and there's a woman in your life that needs to hear this, point them toward the Lean In circles, because they've certainly been beneficial to a lot of people. And we're certainly grateful for Facebook for setting the tone of what it can look like to help a woman. I have a friend from, she's Singaporean, she and her husband, he works at Apple, and fortunately is still working at home because they just had their first baby. The baby came a little bit earlier than they expected, and they're not sleeping. We just met the baby yesterday. But even for fathers, you know, paternity leave is really important. And so, yes, to those organizations like Facebook and many others that are adding paternity leave in, because babies need both parents. I mean, that's just, it's hard. It's hard being a parent, and even two doesn't seem like enough sometimes. So companies that let you bring your whole self to work and let you be a person, a human being, not just a human doing, we're really grateful for. So yes, and we hope that more companies can follow suit so that we can thrive and flourish and bring, you know, our whole brains to work as well as our whole bodies and souls. And it allows us to, I think you see better retention in your companies. And I think this has been proven also with research, when you are allowed to have a life outside of work, and it also improves your decisions. You know, we know that our brains just cannot thrive and make good, innovative decisions when we're constantly working. There is this aspect of you need to take vacation, and sometimes our best ideas come from vacation. My son, he's really into like inventing and that kind of thing. And when he was, I think, in third grade, we were researching together who invented the scanner that you have like in the grocery stores, the supermarkets. And this guy that invented the scanner was somehow inspired at the beach by like the sand. And we were like, how is that even possible? But probably he was on vacation. I don't know the story, but we always wondered, like, you just need time off. You need time with your family. And sometimes our greatest ideas for books or inventions or strategies at work can come when we're just resting. So we do, we want to encourage all companies to keep doing that, not only because it helps us to flourish, but it helps our companies run better. So I wanted to press into this with you a little bit, because you've thought a lot about this, you've written about it, you're teaching about it and training about it. As you think about and as you imagine a workplace that is successful at diversity, equity, and inclusion, what does that look like?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, the best answer I can give you is by sharing, I guess, a story of when I worked, because I actually did have some really great inclusive leaders, right? I didn't just have bad leaders. So, one of them was actually a guy. So, and his name is Steve. So he was the VP of the region. He was, I have to say, he was the most, I'll say the most inclusive leader I've had, right? So yes, he was the VP. I mean, he had the title, you know, he was vice president, but beyond that, I mean, every day he came to work, he opened the door and the entire atmosphere in the office just lifted, right? And so he would literally open the door with, you know, nice, genuine smile on his face, you know, saying hi to everybody. I mean, we were in an open space. He didn't have to say hi, but he did, you know, he would say everybody's name. Who nowadays makes the effort of saying your name every morning? You know, you've just commuted, you know, you had an hour, he had actually a very long, an hour and a half commute. I mean, but he was smiling, saying good morning to everybody, calling them by their names, having a nice word with everyone, and something really personal, like, how was your baby's party yesterday? How was your wife's anniversary? I mean, he remembered everything. You know, how was your run last night? You know, he just, you know, and that was a very inclusive workplace. I mean, everybody felt around him energized and heard and seen and valued. no matter how busy he was, you could just go into his office. You could, I mean, it was a very busy software company, high growth, deadlines, and he was a VP. You can only imagine how busy his calendar was. He would always make time. So people would come to work and feel, heard and seen. I mean, he would know your name. You could literally go into his, office and have a, vent, about the bad day you were having. He would be listening to you and offering counsel. No task was too small for him. I mean, I remember one time we had a big kind of summit event, and we had lots of branded silverware left behind at the hotel, and someone had to pick them up, and I was super busy, and I said, I don't know, and it's like, oh, I'll come and help you. I mean, no task was too small for him. He would help anyone. So it's a very long story to share that, that's a real life inclusive workplace. You actually look forward to it, no matter how busy your day is going to be, no matter how many deadlines and stressful tasks you're going to have to perform, that there is someone there who's got your back and they will be there for you. And so that's a very concrete, real example of an inclusive workplace. That's the type of leader and people that create that kind of inclusive workplace.
Wow, that sounds wonderful. And my guess is, just like you were saying, people felt loyal to stay. Because trust isn't really built because it's demanded. Trust is built when you feel seen and known by that person, and you feel that you can trust them because they know you and they have your best interest in mind. And that breeds loyalty like nothing else does. And it brings a joy at work. I think our brains, when there's a power by fear at work, when there's a boss who doesn't see you or know you, and there's a level of stress that you carry, and it does things chemically to your body where your brain and your body aren't functioning at optimal levels. And so there's just a peace and a serenity that can allow your brain to have these higher functions when you know that your boss is going to walk in and know you by name. And if you have a bad day, it's safe to do so. And you can even talk about it and find some healing from that, traumatic event by just sharing your story. I think that's beautiful. And I would venture to say that people who understand how to do inclusion well have probably seen someone do it on some level. And so it sounds like that was a level of developing you as a leader and even mentoring you to know what it can look like. Because that kind of thing is contagious. Our personalities, our behavior is very contagious. And so we're developing leaders around us all the time by how we treat others. And so it sounds like you have chosen to take that contagion in a good way and spread it to others.
And you're right. And, then you're right. You mentioned the word trust, and there is a sense of loyalty that stays beyond. I mean, even though we've moved on, both, Steve and I, moved on to different organizations, we're still in touch. I mean, I still have him on WhatsApp and we send each other, it goes beyond the, colleague, sphere. And I know for sure he's kept the same level of loyalty and friendship. I'll use the word friendship with everybody who used to work in his team. I mean, for sure. And so people would have followed him anywhere. And I think it's an example of someone who understood that his job as a leader is not to hit the goals and, hit performance. Of course, that's something he's measured on, but he understood that his number one job is to create a team where people feel trusted. And I would even say, use the word loved, because his number one goal or worry at night was, are my people feeling supported, right? And as long as the answer was yes, everything would work. And in fact, we were the most performing business unit globally. And all teams were looking at us, wondering what we were doing to be doing so well in terms of performance. And I to this day, I'm convinced it was our leader. I mean, you can't fake that level of trust and psychological safety. And that's the type of thing that makes people work twice hard. I mean, people would happily work longer hours without anybody asking them to. They just felt, okay, I've got this deadline, I don't want to let him down. So yes, it goes beyond just being nice. It creates deep levels of trust, psychological safety, engagement that just bring productivity and performance and motivation. So
Yes, that is absolutely an observation I have made in my over 20 years of leadership in multiple countries. I don't care who you are. If you're the kind of leader that sees people, knows about them, and makes time for them, and shows love, pastoral care, all the things, people will walk through fire for you. They will move continents for you. They will uproot their family and join you in a new endeavor, because there's nothing like being known by a leader like that. And yes, people will work overtime with joy. But when it's demanded, or when there's an ingratiation, like, I gave you this gift, therefore you should follow me, it doesn't have the same tone, and it doesn't have the same trust. There is just a trust and a loyalty that's bred by people like your boss, Steve. So Steve, wherever you are, thank you for pouring into Perrine, and for all the people that you've poured into, and for leaders like him and like you now, because he's taught you how to do that. We are so grateful. I think that in a world that is stressful, where people aren't being included, where we see a lot of bullying, we see a lot of intimidation and coercion going on, telling this story and highlighting those stories gives us hope that it still can happen, and it still does produce great results all around and multiple levels of who we are as human beings. I just would love for you to answer this question for our listeners everywhere, all around the world. What are some practical steps that people can take toward diversity, equity, and inclusion in the next day or month or year?
Yeah, so if you're, especially, so my expertise is really in the workplace, in the context of the workplace, things like, and I always talk about small daily acts. It's not about a big dramatic change. So some of the small daily actions you can take include unexpected gifts or tokens of appreciation. Again, you don't have to be a manager. You can be a colleague. Really just say thank you when someone does something great for you at work, or I just say thank you. Something I've heard the other day, that a lady, I can't remember her name, she gave a TED talk. It's at the end of her day, I think it's a great technique. At the end of her day, she looks at all the people she spoke to, whether it was a work meeting, a colleague, a partner, a vendor, and she sends a thank you note. How amazing is that? You send a thank you for your time today. Whether they talked about, and so that's an example of a small thing you can do to make the people around you. It doesn't have to be, you can be your colleague, of course, your boss, your employee, your partner, your vendor. Thanks for your time on the phone today. I appreciate you took the time to speak. That's creating inclusion and belonging and connection. Daily check-ins with your team. Nowadays, a lot of people work remotely. So a daily check-in, I'm not talking about, big brother controlling. I'm talking about a text. How's your day today? It's like, how are you doing today? To show you care and you're here. Celebrating birthdays and work anniversaries. Today's your first anniversary. Thank you for being with us for a year. Always be celebrating the small wins. You send a nice pitch to a client. You might not sign, but you did a great work. So great work on that pitch, or ask what you can do to help. I know it's always uncomfortable because we're all so busy and we're worried we're going to have even more work. But if you ask someone what you can do to help, you'd be surprised how it would come back, 10 times in return. So ask what you can do to help. So those are all, and of course, shutting down bullies. So if you ever witness misconduct at work or on public transport or anywhere else, standing up and standing up against bullies. So again, those are all small acts of inclusion you can do at work, outside of work, with your family, to become a better ally to everyone and create more inclusion everywhere.
Yes, those are really great ideas, and they don't take a whole lot of time. And I think that's what you said, is we don't want more work, but sometimes that little moment can do so much to create trust on a team, for teams to bond together. And we do know that when teams are more in sync and there's more safety, all kinds of people have done work around this. Brene Brown is a really great one, who talks about just that vulnerability with each other and how you can do exponentially more if you just take that little time to show appreciation, to show it's okay to bring your feelings into this meeting. I know Brene Brown starts her meetings with like, give me 2 feelings that you're feeling. And it creates that psychological safety. And so, yeah. And then showing gratitude, like you said, is so important, because that shows that you were seen and known, and known by name, and that you were remembered. And it goes such a long way in a world that, especially during COVID, times on Zoom and things like that, can feel so detached. It's one of those ways we can find human connection, even over digital spaces through emails and things. So those are really great ideas. And then I also want, because I know you have a lot of resources, but what are some of your maybe top resources that you can point us to for how to learn how to be more inclusive, whether it's podcasts or YouTube channels or books or audiobooks or whatever. We'd love to have more resources.
Yeah. So of course, if you, I mean, my book is relatively new. My book has only been there for just a few months. So if you, and it's really focusing on the topic of inclusion within the context of the workplace. If you are in particular interested in the topic of inclusion in the context of the workplace, I would recommend my book. That's available on Amazon. In terms of podcasts, there are so many great podcasts out there. Your podcast is fantastic, of course.
Yeah.
There, there is a podcast called HR Leaders, which has a lot of great tips around inclusion, diversity. Another podcast called The Workplace Revolution. I think it's by Sile Bohlani as well. So those are some podcasts. And of course, they also have YouTube channels as well if you're more of a YouTube person. So those are sort of initial resources I would, and then you talked about Brené Brown, of course. I mean, you have to watch her TED Talk. You have to watch Brené Brown because although she's not a diversity and inclusion expert, she is a vulnerability expert, which is absolutely connected to creating belonging and inclusion. We have to be authentic, vulnerable. So I would definitely recommend watching her on YouTube, her talk. I think it's called Brené, just search Brené Brown TED Talk, you'll find her.
Yes, absolutely. It's one of the most watched TED Talks. And she also has a podcast that I really like. I think it's called Unlocking Us. And she's written several good books like Dare to Lead and other ones. But everyone definitely pick up Perrine's inclusion book. She has a lot of great things to say. She comes from personal experience of inclusion in her own many countries she's lived in, many cultures and languages that she speaks, and just her corporate experience as well. And I'm asking everyone this question in our series, which is a change maker series. And so thank you for being a change maker in our world and society. But I know there's probably at least one person out there that you admire as a change maker. So is there anybody you could point us to that you have learned from and that you admire?
Gosh, there are so many change makers. Let's see. I mean, so many names come right to my. So, I mean, we talked about Brené Brown. So, I mean, of course, she's amazing. In my top list, there's definitely, I have to mention Oprah Winfrey. I mean, I am such a huge fan. I've read all her books, her audiobooks, just her message. I think it's just amazing. So if we're talking about change makers and role models, she would be on my top, list. Oprah Winfrey with Brené Brown. I think the two of them. Definitely, I would mention them.
Yeah, for sure. What is it about Oprah Winfrey that you particularly admire? I know she's definitely been one of the most successful women in our generation and comes from a difficult story that she's very vulnerable about. But what is it in particular for you that you admire about her?
Yeah, I think she found her voice. If you listen to her audiobooks and her stories, it took her a while to find her voice. I think a lot of us struggled finding our voices, especially as women, I think. And so just her journey about, of course, she had a lot of struggles as a child in her childhood and teenage years, but it took her a while to find her voice. And it happened gradually, but she never gave up. And she once she found her voice, she really embraced it. She really went for it. And I think that's when she stepped into her own self. And I think all of us can learn from that. We can all find and just becoming our authentic selves. Yeah, which is hard. It doesn't happen overnight. So I love about her that she really steps into herself and really goes, 100%. I think that's something I admire about her.
Well, yes, I think that we resonate with that as human beings. I think one of the lies that is hard to fight against with diversity and inclusion, equity and belonging, all of it, is that you have to be this type of person. But I think the whole inherently in diversity and inclusion is this idea that we're all unique as human beings. There's no two human beings that are exactly alike. Even I'm a mom of twins and they're not alike at all. And so you can be born on the same day, same parents, same family, and still be very different. And so we do need everyone's unique voice contributing because we all benefit from it and we're all inspired by it. So I think that's probably what's inspired a lot of people about Oprah Winfrey is that we naturally want to be ourselves when somebody else can be fully themselves, and it frees us all up to be who we actually are. And the world just needs more people bringing their authentic, vulnerable selves out there. And so thank you for being one of those people and inspiring us to do that, to come into our workplaces and give people the freedom to be who they are, because we're being who we truly are. And everybody, once again, go and buy Perrine's book, Inclusion. It's available on Amazon. She also is writing in a lot of other spaces, so follow her. Where can they follow you on social media?
Yeah, sure. So I'm on LinkedIn, Perrine Farque. I'm on Twitter, Perrine Farque. I'm also on Instagram, Facebook. So any of these platforms, whichever you use. I'm also on YouTube, whichever you use most.
Great. Yes. Well, everybody go follow her and learn more from her. I'm sure you'll be writing and doing things for many, many years to come that will inspire us to be more inclusive in all kinds of ways. So thank you for your thought leadership in this. Thank you for bringing your full self to this interview. And we wish you all the very best, Perrine.
Thank you so much for having me, Lori. Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Perrine is doing such a great job of leading us in how to be more inclusive. Please check out her book, Inclusion. It's available on Amazon. Also, just take to heart the things that she mentioned on just some of the diversity, equity, and inclusion basics that we could all be a part of, which are leading by example, of learning to be the kind of person we want to be, and accepting who we are, that we're tired, we're stressed out, we're overwhelmed, but just little steps to be generous or inclusive really make a difference. And doing small things to change, like listening to podcasts of people who are different from us, or audiobooks of people who are really different from us in terms of background or gender or ethnicity or even sexual orientation, just to understand the position that people are in that might be something we never considered before. Maybe we have stereotypes in our own minds that can be broken down when we understand and have compassion on people's journeys that are just different from us. And it can be a way of including others, even when we have very different worldviews. It's a really beautiful thing we can do in terms of being more inclusive toward others by just listening. It's a great place to start. And I do find audiobooks and podcasts a great way to do that. But if you're blessed to do that in person, it's also a really great idea to reach out to that neighbor, that person that you see at the supermarket every time you go, to, just ask how their day is going, and, listening more about their background and who they are as they're, running your groceries across the scanner, just taking little moments to listen to people and hear who they are and be more inclusive in your posture toward them, because, we all know that how we treat others should be a reflection of how we want to be treated. And so hopefully this has inspired you to be more inclusive wherever you're listening to this. If you're finding yourself in a space of just needing someone to walk alongside you, whether you're changing careers, you're working on some life development issues, or, just walking through some relational challenges, I would love for you to check out my coaching at loriadamsbrown.com/coaching. I will take you through a shadow match assessment around your habits, and then we'll discuss how the habits that you currently have are helping you and serving you, and the ones that you might need to add and get better at. So loriadamsbrown.com/coaching. Your first session is free. Next week on the podcast, we have Connie Jacob. Connie is all about creating opportunities for people to find their brave and know they belong. And if there is anybody on the planet who can just inspire you to be free, to be who you are, to dance wherever you find yourself, to just bring joy into your workplace, it is Connie. She is going to just inspire you to find ways to just be healthy. Mental health is a passion of hers. She has worked all around Canada and is speaking widely about this and about flourishing, and her coaching business is just offering many people opportunities to find flourishing. Come back next week and listen to Connie and all of her wisdom and joy. And have a great week, everyone. As we're finishing this episode, if you're thinking, I really wish I could learn more or go a little bit deeper, well, that's what our Difference Maker community is for. I would love to welcome you in to join the rest of us there. Once again, it's only $5 a month to join, the price of a latte at your local coffee shop. You can join at our Changers tier. Difference Makers is a community that really means so much to me. It's very special because each time I have a guest on the show, I record something outside of what we give to just the regular podcast audience, where we go a little bit deeper, and then I post those video episodes in this community and we can discuss them. But also at the very beginning tier, which is our changers tier of this community, you'll get exclusive voting power and help pick podcast topics that give us, more of what we want from your perspective. You'll have access to exclusive 30 plus mini-sodes that aren't out there for the general public. And you'll get every month an exclusive monthly bonus mini-sode. At our Groundbreakers level, which is $10 a month, you can join and get all of that, but also priority access to submit questions to the podcast. And you'll get an additional 2 exclusive monthly bonus mini-sodes. And at our Trailblazers tier, which is $15 a month, the price of 3 lattes a month, you can get all of that, plus also 3 exclusive monthly bonus minisodes, and a patron shout out. So I would love for you to join us at any of those tiers. It'll help you come into this community, be in the midst of all of us, other difference makers, and we'd love to hear your perspective. I certainly would. It's a place to engage more with me and the audience around what you like, what you're resonating with, and once again, go deeper with each of our guests. So please join us in this membership community. I would love to hear your perspective and love to share this extra content with you. So show up at patreon.com/a world of difference.